All right, so a lot of people have been asking where to get started and actually looking for reliable dividends. What kind of companies do I look at? What tickers am I searching? How do I actually get started in looking for companies that are going to pay me that reliable distribution every quarter or every month? For this, I usually like to tell people to look at things that are economic staples. These are things that are going to do well when the economy is doing well, but when the economy takes a downturn, they're not going to have a horrible time. They're still going to be able to pay their distribution. They're not going to cut it. They're not going to suspend it. I thought we'd look at a few companies, both the good and the bad, on what we can look for and what we should try to avoid. Our first example here is going to be IP, that's International Paper. Even in an economic downturn, everyone's going to need paper, everybody's going to need cardboard, so their dividend is relatively safe. As we can see in 2020, their dividend was not cut, it was not suspended, and if we look at their cash flow statement, we can see they had a very tiny drop off in cash flow. What's that, $20 billion? So their dividend's safe. They still have the money on hand to pay out that dividend. Another example is Spartan Nash Company. This is a grocer. People are always going to need to go and buy their groceries. They're going to need to eat. So again, even in an economic downturn, very stable, the dividend is likely very safe. And if we look at their cash flow, we can see that it increased over an economic downturn by a large margin. It more than doubled. Again, very safe, very stable. Our last good example will be JM Smucker. Everybody knows Smucker. People are always going to buy food, their jams, their jellies, their other assorted food items, and as we can see, over 2020, they even raised their dividend. So again, very stable. You're going to get that dividend on time. You don't have to worry very much about it being discontinued or cut. On the flip side of economic staples is things that are often going to be luxuries. These are things that people are going to buy during an economic boom, but during a downturn, they're not going to buy it as much or at all. Our first example for this will be Macy's. Everybody knows who Macy's is. They're a retailer, but they're not a staple. People aren't going to buy a $40 hoodie with a Nike logo on it instead of $40 groceries if they have the choice between the two. And as we can see here, in March of 2020, right when our downturn happened, they suspended their dividend. And if we take a peek at their cash flow, we can see that their cash flow has, even beforehand, their cash flow was decreasing, but in 2020, it is nearly evaporated. We've gone from over $1 billion down to $300 million. If we go to our next example, Kohl's, very similar to Macy's, a retailer. Again, people aren't going to be buying here when they should be buying at a grocery store if they've lost their job. As we can see here, they suspended their dividend for a year. They have recently reinstated it, but it's at about a third of their previous dividend. So here, not very reliable, not very stable. If there's an economic downturn, you could expect your dividend to evaporate and your personal cash flow to evaporate with it. If we take a peek at their cash flow, we can see here that actually they didn't do too badly. Their free cash flow increased 20% year over year, but it was down from a couple years ago. So in this case, not as bad. Maybe they were just trying to preserve capital to get that dividend going again, but still, you missed out on a year of dividends. And our last bad example will be Western Digital Corp. They make hard drives, and even though there was a huge tech boom for stay-at-home work and things like that, they suspended their dividend as well when their earnings turned negative. So as we can see here, they still haven't reinstated it. So again, you would have lost your personal cash flow when this company stopped paying their dividend. And if we take a peek at their cash flow, we can see that theirs disintegrated last year. It went from $3 billion down to $600 million in 2019, down to almost non-existent for the company. So here we see tech, retail, specialty retail, these things, when there's an economic downturn, the cash flow there is going to disintegrate, and they use cash flow to pay those dividends, so your dividends are likely going to be cut or suspended. So if you're really just getting into dividend investing, you're looking for what kind of companies to look at, don't look at market cap, don't look at big names or anything like that. You want things that are economic staples. You want things like IP, like Spartan Nash, like JM Smucker, that are going to continue to pay their dividend even in an economic downturn because people are going to have to buy their products. They're going to maintain their cash flow to some extent, and in doing so, they can maintain that distribution. I hope this helps, and thank you all for watching.